Hello and welcome to the Cyclingnews podcast, brought to you in association with Prenda Ciclismo, Pinarello and Floyd's of Leadville. It's Thursday and we're back with Ed Pickering from Pro Cycling. Hello. And special guest Tom Southam.
Hello.
Hello. We're going to be going through the Tour de France route, which starts in just over 2 weeks' time. We discussed it a little bit in the previous podcast, didn't we, Ed? What's your general overview of the route we've got?
I still think it's extremely hard. It's the mountain stages from the Alps onwards which just seem to be relentless. Even the transition stages are mountainous this year, and I just think the relentlessness of that second half means that although we're talking a lot about the cobbled stage and the short mountain stages, I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are absolutely brutal, massive mountain stages as well, and I think they'll define the race as much as the kind of big ticket stages like the cobbled stage.
We'll get to the second half of the race, which is loaded with climbs, but the first 2 days, the opening weekend in the Vendee region, I mean, on paper they should both be pretty straightforward sprints, but the closer look, it's anything but, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think these first 9 days, to kind of contradict what Ed just said, are going to be so important for the race and have such a bearing just because of the level of stress involved. So even though these stages are flat, they're on the coast. Last year we went down the east of France, so it was sheltered, but going down the west coast, wind, stress. I mean, the first days so stressful. So those two first stages, they've got like 110 kilometres on the coast on stage one, which could be a nightmare at any time. So that's a lot of pressure on those days. As
a team director, would you prefer to see a prologue or a time trial or even a team time trial kick off the race?
Personally, definitely not a team time trial. I think we saw at Switzerland, Tour of Switzerland, what can happen there. And basically, for 4 stages, the GC wasn't even, nobody thought about it. It was a moot point. So I'd rather not see it. I'm happy to see a road stage.
Just in terms of, it would, I guess, take away potentially some of the stress in that you'd already have a pecking order. There wouldn't be such a fight on the front for the GC teams.
I don't think it would make that much of a difference at the Tour de France. Nobody's giving anything away, whether you've got a sort of slight pecking order or not. I think it's just going to be what it's going to be.
And we talked about the crosswinds, but Ed, what about just the roads in those first 2 stages? Just how difficult is it going to be to navigate those?
Quite difficult. And you talked about the pecking order. It's funny. I think it's right though. A pecking order defined by a team time trial or a prologue wouldn't be so important this year because there's so many time bonuses. There's not just the finish line time bonuses, but the extra time bonuses, which maybe we'll talk about later. I mean, they're not massive, but there's a lot of opportunities for sprinters to not just win stages, but take the yellow jersey, which adds its own level of stress. As far as the roads go, I mean, the Vendee is famous for being one of the kind of most rural départements of France, so that, you know, it's not built for a lot of traffic, and the roads are not going to be that wide. As Tom said, the wind, if it blows off the Atlantic, will add complication to that. So, yeah, when I said the second half is harder than the first, I mean, it kind of reminds me a bit of 2015, where there was a very complicated opening 9 or 10 days to the Tour, stress almost every day, and there weren't massive time gaps at any one point or another. I mean, there was crosswind split on the first day, and then uphill finishes had a few gaps. But the impression I got from that, it wasn't the time gaps that were wearing people down. It was the constant stress of just having to be focused every day, and I think that's going to be the theme right from kilometre 0 this year's race.
And just before we get to the team time trial, I mean, obviously not to go into too much detail because EF Education First Drapac. You got it wrong. You got it wrong this time. Powered by Cannondale. Haven't announced their team. But how do you go about selecting a roster when there's so many elements at play in the race? For example, we saw with AG2R, they're really playing to their strengths. They've gone all in for the mountains, and they're going to, you would suspect, lose a bagload of time in the team time trial and in maybe the cobble stage too. Whereas we've just seen with Mitchelton, they've gone all in for GC and have got a pretty balanced squad in terms of protecting Yates on the cobbles, and then in the mountains maybe they're shy of one climber. But what's the balancing out there?
I mean, you need to think about how useful somebody can really be. I mean, it's all well and good taking a climber, but if the extent of what they can do is survive in a group of 40 riders and give someone a drink, that's not a lot. I mean, it's nice to have people there, and it's nice to look on TV and see, oh, we've got this person and this person and this person. But unless they can have a positive effect on the race, sometimes it's more useful to have someone who can do other things, which definitely will have an influence on the race. Looking at this course, with those first 9 days, you kind of have to think you really need guys for that, because as much as if you've got a climber and they can get someone they can be with someone until the final part of the climb, then there's the favourites group. Then you've got 3 kilometres or 2 kilometres when it explodes. The time gap's going to be limited as to what you can lose, because everyone goes flat out for that part and people lose time, but not a great deal. Whereas on a stage where you're on tiny roads in Brittany and you're in trouble, something happens, and you need people to close what can become 2-3 minutes, that's really important. So I think you have to weigh that up quite seriously.
Yeah, Movistar found that out to their cost in 2013, didn't they, on the crosswind stage where Valverde
Trying to remember.
went out. Yes, it's quite well. Valverde was out the back early on, and the sprinters teams.
So,
and Kittel was out the back as well, I think, that day. But Movistar, it was left to Movistar to chase, and only Quintana ended up in the front group, and they were unequal to the task of pulling back on a flat stage in the middle of France.
That's the thing. On a flat stage, you can lose minutes and minutes if you're isolated. On a mountain stage, you can if you get caught out early and you've got stuff to do. But I think the risks are always slightly higher than people imagine on those flat stages.
Briefly on the team time trial, I mean, BMC, Team Sky, Mitchelton now. Can we see past those 3 teams? Do you think there's much that might go on there?
Quickstep generally put a good account of themselves in TTTs, but maybe they're less interested in the GC this year. But yeah, I think those 3 teams are standout favourites.
I mean, yeah, BMC. I mean, you saw how fast Sky went at the Dauphiné. Yeah, I would put BMC and Sky ahead of Movistar by a margin, actually.
How much time could riders such as Bardet lose on a stage like that?
You saw that Dauphiné, Sky were putting upwards of a minute into most of the teams, weren't they? So, over the course of the same distance. And it's quite rolling around Cholet as well. I think they've used a route similar to the one they had in the time trial a few years ago.
2015, yeah.
It was all a tailwind at the Dauphiné, though, which kept the gaps smaller.
Oh, okay, that make a difference. But Sky, I think, will work hard on that stage to kind of leave her open as the largest possible gaps. And, it could be quite a big deal. And if AG2R they've got some decent rouleurs. I mean, they've got Didier, they've got Niasen. I mean, I know they're not the kind of at the same level as Sky, but I think all the teams know that's such a potentially dangerous stage that they won't have left their eye off it.
And what about the likes of Nibali and Dan Martin?
Yeah, well, I mean, UAE had a disaster at the Dauphiné, but that wasn't, I don't think, representative of their tour team, was it? I would say those guys are going to lose up to a minute there.
That's not game over.
No, not at all.
It's not. And in defence of a closer tour, I looked at the results of the last few team time trials. Obviously, every team time trial is different. Winning margins have actually been very fine in the last few tour team time trials. It's not to say they will be this time, but it's not necessarily true that people are going to lose minutes like they used to do in the 1980s when there were significantly weaker teams. I mean, all the teams are well organised. All the teams know what they're doing. So, it's not necessarily true that it's going to be a key stage, but it's dangerous. It's like every stage of the tour, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, everyone does more work coming into the Tour de France team time trial. Often you get you go to a team time trial and there's 1 or 2 teams that have really prepared and have had camps all the way through the year, and they go to the Tour of Swiss or whatever and they've got a great team time trial team. But for the Tour, everyone will be doing the same work.
Just moving forward, we're going to Brittany for stage 4, and rather than just look at the route, let's just touch on the sprinters that we are going to see in the Tour. So Cavendish, Groenewegen, Gaviria, Kittel, Greipel, no Ewan, of course, not selected. Christoph, Demar, Buani. Who do you think is going to stand out, not just on stage 4, but in the first week? Or is it going to be so close that it's just going to be... Sagan, of course, too, actually.
I think, yeah, we were saying just before we started, I think for me, Groenewegen's going to be there, going to be winning. It's going to be good, I think.
Yeah, I get the sense from this year's sprints that I sense that the time has come for kind of just shift of the generations. We've had the kind of Cavendish, Greipel, loath to lump Kittel in because he's a bit younger, but I think Cavendish and Greipel are going to find it more difficult to dominate this year than they have in previous years, purely because of, it's 2018. There's a young generation of extremely gifted sprinters. I think Groenewegen and Gaviria are leading the way with that. And I've said in the mag, I think Gaviria has the greater press and the greater presence. He's got a better reputation, and he has done some absolutely extraordinary things. And he's really sparkly. Well, we've seen what he's done. I mean, he's fast. He can win from a long way out. He's got a lot of snap. He won 4 stages at the Giro. Same time, tour sprint stages are very kind of. They seem not to be very easy to win for many sprinters. I mean, sprinters tend to kind of get into a groove and dominate. I just sense that Groenewegen's got a kind of more. He's got more solidity about him than Gaviria, and he'll thrive. I mean, the Champs-Élysées sprint it's a wide road, very, very fast sprint, and he won it from a long way out last year, holding off Greipel. And the fact that he's done that will give him confidence to kind of try and carry on where he's left off and try and dominate the Tour sprints from the start. And whether it's going to happen this year or not, what has happened in the last X number of years, going back right to the start of Cavendish's career, once a sprinter starts winning at the Tour, they tend to keep on winning. I don't know why that is, and it might be different this year, but momentum is key, confidence is key, and whoever gets that early will got the Tour to a good start.
Tom, would you write off the likes of Greipel, Cavendish and Kittel?
Based on Greipel's form, what I saw in Switzerland, I think so. I think anyone would be a fool to write off Cav completely, because he is Cavendish, Kittel as well, his form's not been great this year. I mean, Tirreno won 2 stages, but apart from that, he's looked a little bit wanting for me for most of the year. I'm not quite sure. His lead-out's been really organised to a point, and then it seems like it just goes to pieces.
And what about the French? Demar won a stage last year. Buhani obviously didn't. Could we see?
Demar won a Swiss stage as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So on form, and he I never know with Demar. I never know whether how fast he's compared to the others. I mean, I kind of see him as a classic rider / sprinter in the same mould as Christoph, which, to my mind, necessarily, probably means fewer stage wins over the course of his career. But the fact that he's won one already will give him confidence. Buhani, you never know. I mean, the thing is that he's spent the whole year under a bit of a cloud, and by all accounts is not getting on so well with his team. Daniel Friebe raised a feature in last month's mag about the difficult kind of not just year but career that he's had. But he's popped up and won quite a few races this year. Not big races, but he's the kind of person who I think you don't want to write him off too much, because it will fire him up more. And while he's not looked like winning Tour stages before, he's kind of on the edges, and it's the story. You never know what's going to happen. I'll be surprised, but he's evidently a good sprinter.
We didn't really talk about Christoph, but writing his chances off, given that hasn't had the greatest season. He's won a couple of races in the last couple of months, but doesn't have the best lead out and doesn't look to be in the best of shape at the Tour de Suisse.
No, didn't appear to be a way off that, I think, personally. But just to go back to Buhani, actually, I think it's Cedric Vasseur's been doing really interesting things with him this year. He put him under a lot of pressure, dropped him from races, sent him to races he didn't want to go to, and has been clashing with him quite hard, I think deliberately. I think it reached its worst point, and then he started winning. And I think that they've actually got momentum now going forwards, and I think he could be a surprise.
Do you think that was deliberate?
100%.
By Vasseur? That's interesting.
Is that a big gamble? Would you do that? I mean, he was almost judging him in the media, which is rare for a team manager to do, to be so vocal and opinionated about your star rider to journalists.
I mean, I think he came in because he was needed. I think the team, it wasn't working the way it was working before. Cofidis is a long-running team, probably with some dead wood that needed changing. So he's had the chance to think about what he's going to do when he goes in and make a plan. And I spoke to Cedric at Amstel Gold Race about it, or Liège, I can't remember which one, but and he was set on this path of how he was going to do it, and I think it's all been quite deliberate.
Not won a stage since 2008?
Cofidis, no, they haven't. Chavanel?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think so.
Navarro's going well.
Navarro is going well, yeah.
He was second in the Route du Sud, wasn't he? Or, yeah.
He's won Vuelta stage, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has, and he's been top. I think he's ghosted into the top 10 of the Tour before, kind of as much by judicious break selection.
He went in that break
but he's resilient and riding well. So maybe Cofidis to do a good Tour.
Maybe. Well, let's move forward to stage 5 and 6. We'll lump them together because they're somewhat similar in the sense that they're really for the classics rider. We've got the stage first to Quimper and then to the Mur de Bretagne, which we last saw in 2015 and then before in 2011. We talked about bonus seconds as well here, which are going to be vitally important. But really, it's the first test for not just the likes of Sagan and maybe Van Avermaet, but also the GC teams are going to have to be very careful on their stages as well, aren't they?
Yeah, they've thrown it's the first time at the Mur de Bretagne they've got the bonus on it, or is it just after, I think?
It is...
Just before. Well, before.
Just after, actually.
Just after, yeah, you go over it and then... So, yeah, I mean, like these days are just full of booby traps for me. Really difficult, really small roads. I was looking this morning at the planning for how you're going to have wheels for everybody, because team cars are basically out of the equation on a lot of these roads. So there's a lot of people going to be doing a lot of planning around this, which just adds this whole other layer of stress to these two stages in particular are going to be really difficult. I
thought, for reading from the Giro, that only Sky did any planning when it came to wheels, selection at races and nutrition.
I don't know.
Is that not right?
I don't know that that's entirely true.
Oh, well.
How hard are these stages physically, just in terms of the riding up and down hills?
I mean, I think that the thing is the speed and the stress is constant. The actual going up and down, I don't think you really notice that much. It's the fight before to be there, and then the lefts and rights, and it's I think more so mentally demanding than really physically. I mean, I haven't checked how many metres of climbing that is on either of those days, but
Brittany, so it'll be more than you think.
Yeah. It'll add up. But I still think it's a real mental fight.
We talk about the extra bonus sprints and whether they make a difference, because just to explain to anyone who's not up to date with the rules, as well as time bonuses at the finish of stages, which is 10, 6 and 4 seconds, there's a special bonus sprint, not for points, just for 3, 2 and 1 seconds, placed at various points during the stage in the first 9 days of the race. 3 seconds is not a huge amount of time, but do they factor into the planning of the average team or the excellent team, or are they kind of just an extra complication?
I think the idea of them is that yes, it does make a big difference. I think that like the race organisers have gone out of their way to make these things tempting enough that people will try and get them, and in a difficult enough place to get people really coming out and fighting for them. At the Tour de France, like a second is really valuable. Any time is really valuable. Like we saw at the Giro, at the Giro you can lose time and fix things, at the Tour, it's really difficult to fix those seconds.
Do you think it would be a case of the second string teams that know that further down the line they're going to have limited opportunities of perhaps taking a stage or taking a jersey? They might be the teams that kind of go for those sprints, and that might define the next 3 or 4 days because they might be in yellow rather than a Sky or a BMC.
I don't think that after the team time trial those teams are going to be close enough for that to make a difference.
Prenda Ciclismo provide their customers worldwide with unique cycle clothing that's great quality without a premium price. With knowledgeable cyclists as staff and free shipping on qualifying international orders, truly excellent service awaits you. Visit Prenda Ciclismo online at prendis.co.uk.
So stage 7 is the longest stage of the race, where Wiggins Wiggins won in 2012, I think, your time trial.
Yeah, it's the final time trial.
Do you have an important fact to share with us?
Yeah, best press buffer of the Tour. They do silver service at Chartres, so gallingly, I'm not going to be out at the Tour at that point in time, but I'll make sure my colleagues are well fed that day. Very important business.
We've got obviously 2 more stages coming up, but the one that stands out is going to be stage 9 to Roubaix. 21 kilometres of cobbles, 15 sectors in total. I think usually we have maybe 4 or 5 sectors going back to maybe 2014 and 2010.
We've got a feature in this month's magazine about it, Daniel. You can find out all about them there.
Well plugged. But what is this the biggest stage of the race? Or the most important stage of the race for GC?
It's massively significant. I did the recon of this stage a few months ago. And it's really, really significant. It's really hard. It's not just a few token sections of cobbles. If there's wind, even before the cobble sections, you've got a really hard day. And you can lose or gain significant time here that would take you a lot of work to make up in the mountains.
Yeah, it looks brutal. It's as if the previous experiments with cobbles, which happened in 2014 and 2015. Obviously, we've got a long history of cobbles in the Tour, but they started dabbling with them again in 2010. Went quite well in terms of kind of an exciting race. Maybe the riders didn't enjoy it that much, but went quite well in 2010. They kind of upped the ante a bit in 2014, and it was one of the defining stages of the race with the rain. 2015 wasn't so significant. I think maybe the wind was in the wrong direction. It was a headwind or something. But those experiments with cobbles look like they do look like child's play compared to the distance and the number of cobbled sectors and the difficulty of the sectors. And yeah, it's such a kind. I think it casts such a kind of looming shadow both over the opening week of the race and over the what's to come. It's hard to look past it. It's hard to even look at the mountains without realising you've got to this is the kind of hardest entrance exam for the mountain stages you could ever have in the Tour.
Tom, from a director's point of view, what's your plan going into a stage like that, in the sense that you've got assuming guys like Van Mark and a couple of other the Cobble Classics guys go to the race, you've got a good core that can protect around, but what do you say to Rigoberto Urán, who isn't going to be that experienced when it comes to racing on cobbles? What's his game plan going into this?
I mean, Rigo, like a lot of people, has already seen this stage, and it's a different challenge for him. Without giving too much away, to be honest, we've got a set idea of how we think he can best tackle this stage with the support of the teammates that he's got. And he just has to follow that. But I'm not quite going to tell you what it is.
Is the best game plan? I'm just thinking back to 2014 with Nibali, and then 2015. I think it's 2015 with Nibali and was it 2016? Sorry, 15 with Froome and Nibali at the time. Is the best way to approach that to be as aggressive as possible?
It depends what you mean by aggressive. If you mean trying to break away, then no. But being forwards and at the front of the bunch, it's of course, yeah.
Surely everybody has this idea.
That's going to be one of the problems with it, because The first turn onto the first section of cobbles, you go from basically a 4-lane road on a just under 90-degree bend onto one lane onto cobbles, and it's downhill into it, and not everybody can fit. Simple. So I imagine there's going to be bodies on the floor there.
And that's the first section.
Into the first section, yeah.
How much prep has someone like Andreas Clear brought to this for the team?
A massive amount. I mean, Andreas knows these roads. He does these races. He's got a freakish knowledge of these parts of the world. So he's going to be a huge factor.
We then move into the first rest day of the tour, a well-deserved one. But straight after that, we've got 3 back-to-back stages that, well, I mean, I don't know which one's the hardest out of the 3. They all, on paper, look incredibly, or potentially incredibly damaging for GC prospects. So we've got the first stage from Annecy to the Grand Bonnard. Then we've got the stage 11, which has 4 major climbs in it. A first climb, I think, in the first 30 kilometres, and then we go to Alpe d'Huez on stage 12, and even that has, well, then you've got the Madeleine, the Croix de Fer, and then Alpe d'Huez to finish off with. You couldn't get much tougher in the Alps, could you?
No, it looks awful. It looks so hard, and they kind of varied the style of the stages. The middle stage to La Rosière is only 108 kilometres long. Still manages to fit a first, a second, and 2 all-category climbs into that distance. It seems to be quite an uphill start that day as well, slightly unclassified. So it just looks fraught with complication and difficulty, as if the riders weren't stressed and tired enough.
And you know someone's going to come out of that rest day and suffer immediately, aren't you? You always see one GC rider, whether it's, I'm thinking back maybe Van Gardner a few years ago, Lander in the Giro. I mean, there's always one that doesn't get it right.
Yeah, I remember in 2015 when Froome attacked at La Pierre Saint-Martin, that was straight out of the first rest day and a long transfer, and he seemed to manage the readjustment to racing much better than all the other favourites, and effectively won the Tour on that stage. You tend to get kind of less predictable results maybe on the first mountain day after a rest day. Whether that evens itself out over the course of the next 3 days, not sure. But yeah, it just looks like from the minute they start on stage 10, there's just mountains, more mountains in sight.
What's the standout feature for you in those 3 days, Tom?
I think that so basically the triple header, the fact of how hard these 3 days are, coming after a rest day. I mean, a rest day you have to take as seriously as you take a race day, but it's a lot of people, like a lot of things like, okay, right, we'll do a press conference and this and that, and all these things get added in, and all of a sudden, like you get sleep in the afternoon and a rest and a riding, but like I think you can lose a little bit if you don't manage it properly and you don't sort of keep things really focused through that. And we've got a flight after the Roubaix stage, so that's going to be a longish day. And then straight into the mountains, a short stage in there, like Ed said. I mean, that's going to be hard, and the rhythm changes. That changes the rhythm of how it's going to be. That can be significant, I think, stage 11. Stage 10, gravel as well. Midway through the stage, just for an extra bit of wow factor, as if there's not enough. And then, of course, Alpe d'Huez. So, I mean, it really is savage, and it's coming after. So we've got 9 days of stress, a rest day, and then 3 massive mountain stages. I mean, people are going to be going by the wayside really quickly. I think the order is going to be established here for the Tour, and that will probably be it, or as close to.
Is there a case that because you've got 3 big back-to-back mountain stages, that in a sense it could become slightly negative in approach in racing, and that we just see maybe perhaps breaks go and the GC guys wait, and then it all boils down to that stage 12 to Alpe d'Huez?
I think that no, I think the GC guys will be on the front foot coming into these mountain stages, to be honest, because it won't quite be set yet. People will have to make up for things they've lost on the cobbled stage or the team time trial. So I don't think we'll see the breaks going there.
What happens if, we've talked about this briefly before, but what happens if Froome, for whatever reason, isn't at the Tour, or he doesn't make it to stage 10? How does that change the dynamic of the race?
Because he fancies a holiday in July, just for a change.
Yeah, well, he might not get to decide whether he goes on holiday or not, but someone else might. But if that is the case, or as we saw in 2014 when he didn't make it as far as the first rest day, how does that change the dynamic for the GC?
I mean, if you take Froome out and Sky in, I think there are other options. Geraint, which doesn't change much tactically in which the way they'll do the race. But if they don't have a guy on GC, then you would get a really big shift in the way the race is run, which hasn't happened for a long time. And I mean, Sky could be as aggressive as they wanted and still be the best team in terms of if they put their riders out to go on the attack, that would really scramble a few people's minds.
Do rival teams pick their rosters on the basis that they know that Sky are going to have a really good team, i.e. there to control?
No. I mean, you pick your best roster, don't you, for supporting your leader in the best way possible out of what you've got. But I mean, having any team that has an overbearing influence on a race, I think affects people's mentality more going into the race as opposed to who goes.
Depends if anybody wants to try and, assuming this is all assumptions, but if Sky aren't controlling the race, I assume that someone else will try to. 2014, Astana assumed that responsibility. They had the race leader and had quite a strong team, so they were riding a mountain train, not quite to the same kind of level as Sky maybe, but enough to give Vincenzo Nibali several stage wins on the summit finishes. I assume Movistar would love to do that. I mean, they've picked they seem to have quite a strong climbing team. They might not be able to do it in the opening 10 days of the race, but they've got the most depth of any of the teams in terms of climbers. They've got, I think, 3 riders who've finished on the podium of Grand Tours in their roster. So they would probably try and do the same. Whether they could or not is another question. But the Grand Tour tactics, well, Tour de France tactics, haven't been maybe as wacky as they would be in the Giro, just because the level of everyone is so high that you have less room for creativity and long range attacks than maybe you do in other races. But we'll see. If Froome isn't there, then Froome's not there, and things won't happen in the way they did if he's there.
Stage 13 to Valence is one probably for the sprinters or a breakaway. But then we've got 2 back-to-back stages in the Massif Central. One to Mons, where Jalabert, of course, had that massive assault in 1995. I was going to say 1995. Almost won the Tour, or certainly almost turned it on its head. And then, Cummings won a couple of years ago for MTN. And then the stage to Carcassonne, which on paper should end up with a break or a reduced sprint. But even then, you've got a first category climb towards the end. So, and it's the Massif Central, so it's very difficult terrain, isn't it?
Yeah, grippy, lumpy roads. And I've been cycling the Massif Central a few times. They've got the roads seem to have this thing. Even if they're slightly downhill, it feels like you're riding uphill. Don't know what it is, but I think these 2 stages are kind of, they're not a break in between the Alps and the Pyrenees. They're really, really hard stages, just in terms of the profile, even not taking account the narrowness and graveliness of the roads. The Mons stage is a net uphill, virtually from sea level up to 1,000 metres, over a couple of second cat climbs, and that finish is very, very hard. It's it's a drag race up to the top, and everyone goes as fast as they can. It's extremely hard and steep, and normally a stage like 15 to Carcassonne might be just a bit rolling and a chance for the break and a chance for the GC riders and sprinters just to maybe have anything approaching a day off, but they've stuck a first category climb in. It's 40k from the finish, so it won't be decisive. But then again, Froome's weakest moment in the Tour last year came on a first category climb on a stage in the Massif Central. He came close to missing being in the lead group because of that mechanical. So yeah, these 2 stages just add to the complication and toughness in my view.
Tom, when it comes to breaks, we saw at the Giro very few, if any, really survived. Do you think it's going to be the same at the Tour de France? I mean, we just talked about 2 stages where breaks could decide the stage, or is the breakaway dead?
I mean, just looking at stage 15, that starts uphill, which is going to be really good for the break. I think stage 15 could well be a breakaway, actually. It is getting difficult for breaks to work. There's a lot of people with a lot of interests, and when you've got guys like Sagan and Matthews who can climb and sprint, their teams are always going to ride. Like you saw, Bora will just ride because they've got more of a chance when Sagan sprints than if they leave the break go. There's not a lot left over in races now. I mean, especially the Tour. It is getting more difficult. But, I mean, this race is so unrelenting. There has to be a time when it goes. It depends again, how the race is going. Yeah.
You do see, I've kind of mentally divided the breaks into 2 these days. Up to the mountain stages, on the flat stages, it's basically 4 or 5 riders, and it's got no chance. It hasn't worked for years and years and years. 2009 was the last time a break held off the sprinters, and it seems not to happen these days. However, in the second half of the Tour, although the breaks do still get squeezed out, you see a different kind of quality of rider in those breaks. Where you start to see more ambition, and maybe the break gets a bit bigger, 6 or 7 riders, more riders go. And I noticed last year Thomas de Gent was starting to infiltrate the breaks in the second half of the race. And that's the thing. I think breaks do have still a slightly better chance in the second half of the race than they do in the first. Not to say they'll succeed. I mean, the Giro, it took a couple of weeks before a real bona fide break stayed away. But I think Carcassonne, I suspect we'll see 2 races. There'll be the race between the break to contest the finish, and then the GC riders might have a hit out over that first category climb. And again at Mond, I suspect the break will stay away that day.
After that, we then have the second rest day. But then we go straight back into the mountains, and we're in the Pyrenees. We've got the stage to Luchon, where Froome won a couple of years ago with that crazy descent, and Rogers won 2 years before that, and Vockler won before that twice in a row. In your tour guide. On paper, that shouldn't be too difficult a stage, you would have thought, but we've then got the stage a day after on stage 17, which is just 65 kilometres, and this is the one with the grid start, isn't it?
Yes.
What's going to happen there? I mean, are you a fan of this grid start?
I mean, I think it remains to be seen what's going to happen here. I know a lot of guys, when we're talking about it at Swiss, like the bigger guys were pretty upset because they're going to start at the back. So all the sliding space, not much they get because they go straight up a hill, is already gone. So the gruppetto is basically already formed at the back. So they're never going to be on terms in the race. With a team time trial, if you've got one team, you could have one team with 3 riders starting in the first sort of 20 riders still at that point, which can make a difference. I mean, this is uncharted territory, really, isn't it? But there's, as Carsten Kroon says in this excellent preview I'm reading, there's nowhere to ride. It's either up or down. So there's not a lot to do in it. Go hard, descend, go hard, descend, go hard.
What do you make of the profile of that stage?
Looks, I don't know how they've managed to fit that much climbing into just 65 kilometres. It's only smidge over 40 miles, which is, it's not that far. It's not that far, is it? It's kind of a shortish Sunday morning ride on the flat, but yeah, 2 first categories and an all category climb. And about the grid start, it's interesting. I mean, my initial reaction was that it really did favour. It favours the strong teams, and the Tour favours the strong teams anyway, logically. This is kind of making it, and I was kind of, in my gut, I always support the underdog, so it kind of goes against that. What the interesting thing would be is, as Tom said, if a team does have 3 riders up there in the top 15 or 20 of the GC, it then depends on how they ride. If they just impose a fast pace, then they're essentially doing what would happen in the stage only. The interesting thing would be is if they're close enough to the lead for actual attacking options. So if a team had second, fourth and sixth riders overall, what if the sixth rider attacks? You need domestiques to chase down attacks generally. So the other leaders may be faced with the choice where they have to chase a potentially race yellow jersey threatening break, or or let it go, which is is dangerous. And whether it works in inverted commas or not, I don't know. I mean, it depends what their motivation is. If it causes an extremely exciting race, then the tour organisation will pat themselves on the back, say job well done. It could make zero difference. We don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's interesting, but we have no way of knowing how it's going to play out, and it's kind of tricky to plan for until you know what the GC is in the days leading up to it.
It could be a good day for Movistar if everything's going, with their three riders. Like you said, if they all start at the start, but they need to make up time, then you're going to have a real stage on your hands.
Would some of the GC teams, for example, like a Sky or maybe a BMC, would they have the stage in mind when they're riding GC for the first 2 or so weeks and thinking, well, we need to, maybe they're not thinking about the team's classification, but they're thinking, well, we need to have someone that's still going to be round about the top 10 for this particular stage?
For sure, you're not going to leave anything to chance, are you?
Po is next. Another, well, probably the penultimate sprint stage. But then if we fast forward to stage 19 and stage 20, the final two stages really to make a difference on GC. You've got a mountain stage from Lourdes to Laron on stage 19, and then the only individual time trial of the race on stage 20. The time trial is probably the most decisive one out of those two. Although you have got, looking at that stage 19, you've got 3 categorised climbs.
That's an interesting contention, Daniel, because this is the stage that I've got in my mind when I say we're thinking a lot about the cobbled stage and that short mountain stage. This stage, it's the hardest stage of the tour.
Yeah, you've got the Aspen, the Tourmalet, all in there.
Yeah, it's hilly from the start, and then there are massive mountains, and it aesthetically it resembles the Finestre stage of the Giro, where you've got a very, very big climb mid-stage. The Tour is not the Giro, circumstances are different, and the Giro stage 18 was a kind of exceptional, was it 19 exceptional event. But I just think this stage is so hard that the Tour is not over before this stage starts. I think a lot of damage can be done on a stage that's this difficult. It just looks really, really hard. You've got the Tourmalet and the Orbisque. They're just really two of the hardest climbs in the Tour.
Do you think the GC is going to could be decided? I mean, we saw it last year. Do you think these two stages are going to be the most decisive in determining who has the yellow jersey come Paris?
I think the routes might be great, but I think there's so much up until this point. People are going to be tired. I don't see people being fresh enough to come up with great sort of race-defining moves. I mean, yeah, we saw it in the Giro, but I think that was we're not going to see that again for the next 10, 15 years. I think it could go either way. I mean, you could have fireworks and someone really trying to salvage something, or it could just get steamrolled.
I was thinking there's also the danger, which again, different race, but we saw in the Giro both Simon Yates and Thibaut Pinot cracked at the death, basically. And this stage to me looks like the potential for it. Like you say, that no riders are going to have a huge amount of snap in their legs for big attacks, but I suspect that any rider would think they're vulnerable on a stage like this.
People by then will be riding to protect what they've got rather than risking something that surely gets it, rather than what they might do at the Giro.
You could see one of those massive 35 rider breaks in this stage, where nobody on the GC teams really want to have. They're tired, so they're going to let 35 riders go down the road, 2 or 3 guys from all different teams, and that defines the stage. And behind, they try and take it as easy as possible.
Let's end with some predictions. We've probably changed our minds.
Do you want to mention how hard that time trial is?
Yeah, I've seen the TT.
Is it as hard as they say?
It's hard. It's hard, and there's The descents can be tricky as well. The narrow roads. There's not 1 metre of flat in the TT. It's a really nice course. I really like it. But it's hard. It's hard. I mean, that's another reason why this stage might be easier.
Let's end with some predictions. The next stage is obviously Paris. Let's go with who do you think is going to win on the Champs-Élysées, and then pick your top 3 for the GC. Tom, you're a special guest.
Special guest first.
Yeah.
Who do I think is going to win the Champs-Élysées?
Yeah.
On the Champs-Élysées? Right. I think it will be a sprinter of some sort. I'm going to go with Groningen. Who?
Him.
Yeah.
Lotto.
Yeah. Yeah.
Edward?
Yes, I agree. I think that sprint seems to suit him very well, and I think he will underline his dominance of the Tour sprints by winning the final one.
And GC then, top 3. Ed, you can go first this time.
I played it a bit safe with my predictions. I've said that Froome's going to win, purely because every year I say he's not going to win, he wins. So I'm just going to try and be right this year. I think Quintana will be better this year than he was last year and the year before. He's been a bit flat. You have to get through the opening 10 days, of course, but close second for Quintana, and then Bardet in third. And I felt bad about leaving Nibali off the podium, but there's only 3 spots.
What about Rigo? Where's Rigo?
Rigoberto Urán is going to do extremely well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He's going to make your top 3?
Of course.
Okay, so what's your order?
Look, I think Froome goes, he's going to win.
Yeah.
Potentially. I think Bardet will be on the podium.
It's a bit cool. I'm surprised you both put him in.
I think Bardet will be on the podium.
I know he's done it the last couple of years, but, well, only by the skin of his teeth last year, but...
Yeah, that's the only thing that counts against him. That last year he was on his knees, but he still finished third.
Yeah.
So, Froome...
Rigo, Bardet, same as last year.
Same as last year,
Exactly.
in that order?
Yeah. Or a different order with different riders, potentially.
There will be 3 riders on the
I
podium.
hate making predictions. It's the worst.
It is. But we still make you do it. Froome, Nibali, Quintana for me. Even safer than yours, I think. Froome will win. And if he doesn't, then it'll be Nibali.
Nobody picked Richie.
No. I mean, he's not made the podium before. He's not made top 4 before, so... I think it'll be difficult for him.
He's got a strong team.
He does have a strong team. Something always happens, and like you say, it's very difficult to right or wrong in the Tour if you lose time for whether it's a mechanical. I mean, a couple of years ago they just left him by the side of the road on one stage when he had a flat tyre or mechanical, and they just carried on riding. I mean, yeah, I think. And that wasn't his fault. I think that came from the team car. But yeah, there's always something. I think it'll be close, but the safer bet is probably on those. I mean, they've won Grand Tours, those 3. So I don't think you can get a safer pick. All 3 of them are going to wipe out now, aren't they?
Yeah,
It's fine by me.
Yeah.
Well, that's about all we've got time for, I think, for this week's edition of the Cyclingnews podcast. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Tom, who's a special guest, for coming in.
Cheers.
Thank you.